Welcome to the countdown. I'm Bill Ritter of Eyewitness News. This is night 2 of the first presidential primary debate rounds. The Democratic candidates who weren't on stage last night getting their chance tonight. 10 of them. The top 2 in the polls, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, likely to be the targets of criticism. And so too, perhaps more than last night, will be President Trump. Political reporter Dave Evans joins me now live in Miami. He predicted last night, Dave, that first Bill de Blasio would make some waves, and he did. A lot of tweets on Bill de Blasio. I want to start with him first just to get a little local action here. A lot of tweets about Bill de Blasio saying, hey, he's a better debater than he was mayor, from his critics on the right and the left.
Well, I think that's one of the big surprises and the takeaway from the first night of these 2 debates here in Miami. That's that Mayor de Blasio did much better than expected. He interrupted a couple of times. The first one was about insurance for everyone. He interrupted O'Rourke from Texas. And then later on, he did on immigration. He was not afraid to interrupt, make his point. He was passionate. I think he was even surprised that today the New York Post gave him a thumbs up. The Post often very critical of Bill de Blasio, so I think that he was surprised today that even the Post gave him thumbs up today.
You know, he talked a lot about he being the candidate of the working people, and he really talked more than the other members of the debate teams up there, the 10 Democrats, that this was really about the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. How is the party going to go ahead? Is it just about getting a candidate who's can beat Donald Trump, or is it about someone who can really push the Democratic Party to the future? And I thought he articulated that more than anyone else did.
Well, that's the real dilemma, I think, right now in the Democratic Party. How far to the left do they want to go? I talked to Mayor de Blasio this afternoon, and I asked him, do you think that Joe Biden is out of touch with this leftward surge that we see going on in the party? He said, absolutely. He does think that Joe Biden is out of touch. Biden has had a rough couple of weeks on the campaign trail. The New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg this past weekend, she wrote that sometimes it looks that the vice president looks like he is forgetting his lines when he is trying to make a point. So he has had a rough last couple of weeks, and I think that a lot of the people like de Blasio, like Elizabeth Warren, like Kamala Harris, they are going after him on the left, and also certainly Bernie Sanders. We're going to hear a lot of that tonight.
Is that your prediction? You know, you made a pretty good prediction last night about what likely was going to happen, and it didn't seem like they attacked him at all last night. But since he's going to be center stage literally tonight, it seems unlikely he's going to get away unscathed.
Well, we kind of expected that de Blasio, because he has been so critical of Joe Biden, that he would go after Biden, even though Biden wasn't on the stage last night. That certainly did not happen. The other big surprise, I think, last night was that the Democrats didn't talk that much about Donald Trump. We know certainly how they feel. Donald Trump is certainly their #1 target, but they didn't talk about Trump that much last night either.
Yeah, in fact, he was on Air Force One on his way to Japan and halfway around the world, and said he thought the event was boring. I think you could call that debate last night a lot of things. Boring was not one of them. Maybe it was because they didn't talk much about the president.
No, it was a very interesting debate, and I think it's going to be interesting tonight. He is tied up in Japan doing a lot of the state visit that he has to do there in Japan this evening. So I don't think we're going to get many tweets from the president tonight.
You know, it's an interesting thing today. You have the oldest candidates. You have Joe Biden at 76. You have Bernie Sanders at 77, and you have Pete Buttigieg at just 37 years old. It's 40 years difference between the youngest and the oldest candidate. And talk about a generation gap. Biden, a lot like what Mr. de Blasio said to you today, you know, Biden, according to a lot of the candidates, says, you know, he represents sort of what was, not necessarily what is. And yet, all the polls show he's leading not just the Democrats, but he has the biggest margin in any kind of would-be matchup with President Trump.
Well, I think Biden is out front because Americans are familiar, certainly, with Joe Biden. And so he takes into this race all of that familiarity and that goodwill from the American people. But I think that this, you know, could shift here in the next few months. It's going to take some time. But I think, for example, Julian Castro last night, he did a very good job. I kind of came away from last night's debate not knowing that much about Julian Castro and thinking that perhaps maybe a lot of voters out there might want to know more about him also.
I think when he even said, you know, to use the sort of street language, you know, this should piss us off, when he talked about the picture of the father and the daughter dead after drowning in the Rio Grande. I think that resonated with a lot of people, that sort of down home, that spin of talking like that. And I think it surprised people, but I also think it spiked on social media. People seem to like that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I found interesting last night is Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who we don't really know much at all about her. We haven't seen her really bubble up much in the polling yet. I think that she did a pretty good job last night also, being knowledgeable about the facts, but also bringing some humor to the table. And I think she came across as very likable last night.
And what about Elizabeth Warren? She was the front runner of the candidates on the day as last night. What did you think she did? How do you think she did?
Well, I thought it was kind of a little bit weird last night. We were sitting around the first 30 minutes of that debate saying, is this debate going to be all about Elizabeth Warren? Because she got most of the questions. The other candidates talked about her, and so it was like the Elizabeth Warren show for the first 30 or 45 minutes. But then if you look at the second hour of the debate, she basically disappeared during that. So I think she did do a good job. I think that she came across as likable. And sometimes, Elizabeth Warren can come across as the smartest person in the room,
yeah,
and that sometimes rubs people the wrong way. I don't think she came across that way last night. I think she came across as knowledgeable, but also likable. She did do a good job. But in the second half of the debate, we kind of were wondering, like, where'd she go?
And the person with the most amount of time, if that matters, was Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah, Beto O'Rourke, he had the most time in last night's debate. But the troubling thing for him is most of the people, I think, went away from last night's debate saying, what's the deal with O'Rourke? He looked bad, he sounded bad, he didn't seem like he was up to speed on things. So I think if anyone lost last night's debate, it was certainly Beto O'Rourke of Texas. It surprised a lot of us.
I want to talk about another person from the tri-state who was on the stage as well, and he had a strong performance, a lot of people felt, and that was Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey.
He did have a strong performance. I think he came across, I think he was second in the timing of who got the most minutes in last night's debate. I think he got second.
Yeah, he did.
Booker did do a good job, but I've talked to a lot of people today kind of shrugging their shoulders about Senator Booker of New Jersey, that he did do a good job, but nothing really stood out. And I think that one of the pundits we talked with today said it was a lot of platitudes that we heard from Cory Booker. So he did do okay, but not great.
But what you just said is kind of interesting, because it sums up what the real conundrum is for these candidates. They're trying to introduce themselves to the American people. We know Cory Booker. He's clearly very passionate. He was passionate last night during the debate. Which way do they go? How do they portray themselves? They only have these little slivers of time to make an impression. Bill de Blasio chose to make it one way. People who were in New York view him maybe a little differently than the people who saw him for the first time last night. But that's really the conundrum for someone with a lower name recognition that's like Joe Biden.
Well, it is. You've got 20 people so far that, over these 2 nights who are going to be on the stage. I think you've got to say something short, pithy, memorable. That's not easy to do all that. And the other point that I kind of wanted to make about this is I think that the vast majority of the candidates that we see last night and also tonight, they are in the left wing of the party. We talk about this pull and tug in the party. I think most of the candidates are on the left side of that. I think that Biden has the middle ground to himself. To an extent, maybe some of the minor candidates, but if you think that the party is going to be pulled back to the right, it doesn't look like it's going to be that way anytime soon.
Certainly not by the candidates on the stage. In fact, some of the middle of the road candidates saying, let's have Medicare for all, but also with a backup for private insurance companies, and they were sort of trounced by the crowd last night on the stage. Quick prediction for tonight. How do you think Joe Biden is going to be viewed by the other candidates? Are they going to go after him?
Well, I think he's vulnerable, certainly, because he's in the middle of the road. He's the front runner, and so people are going to go after him. But the thing that people forget, he's been on the political stage, for 40 years?
Yep.
He has done a heck of a lot of debates. He is a consummate debater. He knows what he's doing. So I expect him not to fall on his face tonight. I think he's going to do a pretty good job. Yeah, he's going to be attacked. But, Bernie Sanders is also right there behind him. He might get a lot of the firepower from the other candidates also.
And, of course, the other conundrum for the Democrats is a lot of Democrats are going to say, ideology is one thing. Who's going to take on Trump in a debate and who can do better? And that's what they're going to be looking at as well. Political reporter Dave Evans in Miami. He'll have a report tonight on Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock. Dave, thanks for joining us on this first go-round with the countdown. All right, we'll talk to Dave at 11 o'clock. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be around for the rest of the election season. sometimes every week, sometimes whenever news warrants. But thanks for joining us. Again, Eyewitness News at 11 o'clock tonight, anytime on the website and on my Facebook page. Thanks for watching tonight. I'm Bill Ritter for Eyewitness News. For all of us here, we'll see you at 11 o'clock tonight.